"You're not being supportive of our family," she said, as if meeting a doctor's appointment was some kind of betrayal. That's all it was, a simple follow-up after my knee surgery. But apparently, asking for one weekend to take care of myself meant I no longer deserved the title of mother. I was sitting at the edge of my bed when the call came through. The late afternoon sun was still soft, just beginning its slow dip toward the western hills. I just finished folding a small basket of towels, still warm, still carrying a faint scent of lavender. Harper's name lit up my screen. I hesitated. She only called when she needed something. "Hey, Mom," she said, skipping right past any greeting. "Can you take Max this weekend?" "We've got that company retreat in Westland, and Isla's going to Logan's parents. We'll be back late Sunday." I told her no as gently as I could. I explained I had an appointment Saturday morning, nothing serious, just a follow-up, but the timing was tight. And the truth? I was tired. My knee still ached when I woke up, and 2 full days alone with a 10-month-old was more than I could manage right now. There was a pause. Then her voice came through, cool, clipped. "Wow. Okay. I guess you're just not being very supportive of our family." I felt it like a blow. I opened my mouth, ready to remind her of the tens of thousands I'd handed over for their down payment, the hours spent rocking her children while she slept, the nights I stayed when Max had colic. But I didn't say a word. What was the point? "I just didn't expect this from you," Harper went on. "We really needed you this weekend. I don't know what we're going to do now. You're their parents," I said softly. "You'll figure it out." She hung up. No goodbye, no hesitation. An hour later, a text came through. "Please don't come by the house anymore. It's time for some boundaries. We've changed the locks." I read it twice. Then again. I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. My lips pressed together so tightly they trembled. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. No phone call, just a message. After everything. After all the years, after every sacrifice, they changed the locks. Like I was a threat. Like I was no one. I got in the car anyway. Maybe it was instinct. Or disbelief. The streets of their neighborhood looked the same as always, quiet, neatly kept, kids' bikes on lawns, flags drooping in the humid air. But something had shifted. Something deep. I parked across from the pale stone two-story I had helped them buy. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the front door. The same door Harper and I had painted the week they moved in. She was 6 months pregnant with Isla then, her belly round, her eyes tired but glowing with hope. We'd chosen a deep evergreen for the door. She laughed that it looked too serious. That same door stayed shut when I rang the bell. I waited. No answer. I rang again. The baby's stroller was folded neatly on the porch. One of Isla's tiny sneakers lay beneath the porch swing. Then I heard it, footsteps. Whispers. A curtain shifted upstairs. Someone had looked out. I rang a third time, more out of routine than hope. Nothing. I tried the key. The one I'd used for nearly 6 years, ever since they gave me a spare, just in case. It wouldn't turn. It caught and jolted, stuck. She had really changed the locks. I walked back to the car slowly, as if carrying something delicate that might break at any moment. It was hard to tell if I was trembling from sorrow or fury. Maybe both. I sat behind the wheel and stared at my hands. Then I started laughing, quiet, disjointed, almost soundless. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere too deep to name. It slipped out in stutters and wheezes, as if I'd lost my grip on reality. Because in a way I had. It felt like I'd stepped sideways into some alternate version of my life, one where my daughter had decided I was no longer welcome. Or worse, no longer needed. Back home, I made a cup of tea, then forgot to drink it. I wandered through the kitchen, brushing my fingers across counters and drawer handles, grounding myself with every touch. Emma's hand-drawn cards still clung to the fridge. Best Nana. I love you. Crayon hearts. wobbly block letters, a construction paper turkey traced from her small hand. I sat down and stared at my phone. The message, the silence, the locks. You're not being supportive of our family. Hadn't I been? The mortgage co-signed. The emergency procedure covered when their insurance didn't reach. Countless home-cooked meals. Babysitting without notice. Every birthday cake. Every Halloween costume stitched with my own 2 hands. I hadn't kept receipts. But the evidence was everywhere, in the walls of that house, in the pantry I'd stocked, in the children I'd helped raise. I picked up the phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that one too. What could I say that wouldn't sound hollow? What words would ever make her open the door? I stood by the window as the streetlights flicked on one by one. I hadn't changed out of the clothes I'd worn to run errands that morning. I didn't move until the old grandfather clock struck midnight. Even then, sleep didn't come. The next morning, I moved through the house like a stranger in my own life. Everything felt quieter, heavier, like the air itself had settled differently. I didn't turn on the radio like I usually did. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't want the light. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a slice of dry toast and a cup of tea that went cold before I touched it. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked, but the rest of the world felt like it had fallen still. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one where Isla used to sit, sipping from a juice box, legs swinging, telling me about her day at school. The same chair where Harper would sink down after a long shift, sighing like the world owed her something just for making it through. How did I get here? How did I raise a daughter who could turn the lock on her own mother with such ease? Around midday, I opened the small silver tin where I kept their little mementos. A dried Daisy Isla had handed me after preschool. A photo booth strip of Harper in her 20s, wild smile, windblown hair. A thank you card from Logan after Max was born, hurried and scrawled, but still it read, "We don't know what we'd do without you." I stared at that line for a long time. Apparently, they figured it out. My phone buzzed once. I jumped. But it wasn't Harper. Just another automated text about car insurance offers. I pushed the phone away like it might burn me. Then, for the first time in years, I pulled out the yellow folder. The one with the fraying black clip and the faded label across the top, family expenses. Inside were records, not for leverage, not out of pride, but because I'd been a librarian by trade and by temperament. I recorded things. Not everything, never the small favors, the sleepless nights, the endless drives across the city, but the big ones. The financial burdens, the legal ties, the obligations I took on simply because I was the only one who could. There was the $14,500 for their down payment. The $5,700 to cover Isla's hospital stay after Logan lost his job. The $900 stroller Harper said was non-negotiable. The tuition checks that kept Isla enrolled at her private academy. None of it was done grudgingly. Not at the time. I had the means, and I had the heart. That's the role, isn't it? The giving mother. The dependable grandmother. The silent force in the background, keeping everything afloat without ever needing recognition. But now, for the first time, I was asking myself something I hadn't before. Who takes care of me? I looked around the house. No one was here. No one had called to check in. No one asked if I was okay, if I'd eaten, if I'd slept, or if I'd cried into a pillow all night. I had, but the grief didn't scream. It didn't come in waves of sobs. It settled like dust inside me, quiet, suffocating, hard to explain to anyone who hadn't felt it themselves. She changed the locks, I whispered aloud, just to hear it. It sounded absurd. Like I was some reckless stranger and not the woman who once held her daughter through nights of fever and fear. I stood. My knees ached as they always did, but I moved with purpose. I reached for a framed photo from the living room shelf, Harper holding baby Isla, me beside them, all of us younger, gentler. I turned the photo face down on the kitchen table, Then I walked into the bedroom to find my lawyer's card. It was still tucked in my old address book, wedged between the dentist and the vet. I hadn't contacted Ezra Connolly in more than 7 years, not since I revised my will after my husband died. But Ezra had known me since Harper was in high school. He always spoke to me like a person with a mind, not just some sentimental woman hanging on to the past. I dialed the number and waited. Connolly and Anth, done. This is Rachel speaking, the receptionist chirped. Hi, sweetheart. This is Maris Delaney. I was a client of Mr. Connolly some time ago. I'd like to schedule an appointment with him as soon as he's available. I heard the click-clack of keys on a keyboard. Yes, of course, Ms. Delaney. Let me take a look. We can fit you in Wednesday morning at 10. That's perfect. Thank you. She asked if I'd like a reminder call. I told her no. When I hung up, something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger this time, or grief. It felt like strength quiet, but sure. Like I had just picked up a part of myself I hadn't even realized I'd dropped. I wasn't planning to sue anyone. I wasn't going to show up with documents or ultimatums, but I needed to understand. I needed clarity. I needed to know what I had built and what I had quietly given away. Later that day, I pulled down a box from the hallway closet marked house. Inside were old deeds, receipts, insurance paperwork, things I hadn't touched in years. I flipped through the stack until I found it, the equity loan agreement. The one I co-signed when Harper and Logan wanted to expand their kitchen and build a nursery. They hadn't qualified on their own. My name was on it, not as an owner, not with any control, just responsibility. I opened another folder, retirement account statements, transfer records, multiple wire transactions over the years, money sent to Harper, just until Logan gets paid from his next commission, she'd say. A little bridge between jobs. I never asked for any of it back, never even brought it up. Somehow, needing the money back felt more shameful than giving it. I sat in my chair with the papers resting in my lap, letting them speak the truth I hadn't wanted to hear. I had helped them build a life, but I was never truly part of it. A memory surfaced, something Harper said last year while venting about Logan's mother. She always tries to wedge herself in, she'd complained. I can't handle the guilt trips. I just wish she'd stay in her lane. At the time, I'd nodded with sympathy. But now I wondered if that comment had been less about Logan's mother and more of a warning meant for me. That evening, I wandered my small home slowly, as if seeing it again after a long absence. Every item had been chosen with care, the blue curtains with the delicate floral print, the oak shelves worn soft at the corners, the rocking chair that had cradled more stories than people. None of it fancy, but all of it mine. I stood by the window and watched the sun slip behind the rooftops. Somewhere beyond that line of houses, my daughter was tucking her children into bed, perhaps feeling proud of the boundaries she'd drawn, like I was some overbearing presence she'd finally handled. Well, boundaries go both ways. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the usual spiraling kind of wakefulness. It was quiet, still, focused even, as if something inside me had finally turned a dial, and I could hear my own frequency again for the first time in years. By 6 a.m., I was at the kitchen table with a pen, a notepad, and 3 envelopes I kept tucked in the bottom drawer of the old hutch: medical, home repairs, and Harper. I opened the last one. Inside were every thank you card, every printed receipt, every wire confirmation I'd saved, not for proof or guilt, but for remembrance, for the record of where and how I had placed my love. The earliest one was dated nearly 13 years ago, $2, $200 for a rental deposit when Logan lost his job and they had to move with barely a week's notice. I remembered the phone call like it had happened yesterday. Mom, I wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. I hate this. I really do. But there's no one else. I'd said yes before she could even finish the sentence. And then came the others, like breadcrumbs scattered behind me in a forest I never realized I was walking through. Daycare lapses. Insurance mishaps. The time Isla needed braces, and their plan only covered the consultation. Hundreds here, thousands there. All told with the same tone, just this once. We'll pay you back soon. Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. But the trouble with being a lifesaver is that no one notices you until they're drowning, and the moment they're back on land, they forget you were ever in the water with them. I thought about all the times I said yes when everything in me longed to say no. When I canceled lunch with the last friend I had left in town to pick up Isla from school early. When I skipped my arthritis appointment because no one else could watch Max. When I spent my winter heating fund on Christmas presents so Harper wouldn't have to tell Isla she couldn't have the dollhouse all her classmates had. Each time I told myself it was love. Sacrifice. What mothers do. Now, I wasn't sure if it was love or fear. Fear that if I stopped giving, I'd stop mattering. I set the envelope down and stood. My knees protested, but I rose anyway. I walked to the front door and opened it. The morning air carried the scent of dew and cut grass. Across the street, my neighbor, Miss Adeline, was already out in her pale pink robe, watering her blue bonnets. She waved. I didn't wave back. Not out of coldness. I just couldn't lift my hand. Not yet. Back inside, I made another cup of tea and stared at my phone. Nothing. No message. No apology. No explanation. Was this really it? One refusal. One doctor's appointment. One word, no. And suddenly, I was erased. I picked up the phone, scrolled to Harper's name, hesitated. Then I put it down again. What would I even say? That I was sorry for needing one Saturday to care for my own health? That I'd reschedule the appointment again if it meant being welcomed back into the lives I had helped build? I couldn't say that. Not anymore. Because here was the truth I'd spent too long burying, and it arrived without drama, without noise. Just stillness. This wasn't the first time Harper had punished me for setting a limit. It was simply the first time she'd made it permanent. I remembered last year, when I told her I couldn't fly across the country for their anniversary celebration. The doctor had warned against long-distance travel due to my blood pressure. She didn't speak to me for nearly a month after that. Said I was choosing my ailments over her milestones. Before that, the christening. I'd asked if they could consider another weekend, one where I didn't have physical therapy already scheduled. Her response, I don't need drama, Mom. Every time I spoke up for myself, I was met with distance, coldness, silence. And I, like a fool, always went crawling back, with gifts, with apologies I didn't know. Until now. Now I stood still. Let the silence come. Let it fill the room like fog. I didn't text. I didn't explain. I simply breathed, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder labeled estate. Then, with steady hands, I picked up the phone and called Ezra Connolly again. Can we add a few more items to the agenda for Tuesday? I asked. Of course, Miss Delaney. What would you like to discuss? My power of attorney. I'd like to revoke it. And I need to make some changes to my will. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. I filled the waiting days the only way I knew how, by moving. Cleaning corners that hadn't seen daylight in months, scrubbing the kitchen grout with vinegar and an old toothbrush, rearranging books I could no longer read without straining, but still couldn't bear to give away. It felt like preparing the house for a guest who would never arrive. The morning of the appointment, I woke before the alarm. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, brushed my hair smooth, buttoned my soft sky blue blouse with the pearl buttons, and even dabbed on a touch of lipstick. Not for anyone else. For me. To remember who I was when no one else was looking. The drive to Ezra Connolly's office took nearly 40 minutes, and I spent every second rehearsing what I needed to say. But when I sat across from him in the same brown leather chair I'd sat in 7 years earlier, the words came out with ease. I'd like to revoke the power of attorney I granted to my daughter, I said, calmly but firmly. Ezra blinked once, then nodded slowly. That's no problem. We can draft the revocation today. Are you sure, Maris? Completely, I replied, folding my hands in my lap. She no longer needs that kind of access to my life. He didn't ask for details, and I was grateful for that. Next, we turned to my will. The language hadn't changed. Harper and Logan were still listed as primary beneficiaries, with small educational trusts set aside for Isla and Max. The home, the accounts, everything, I had left it all to them. I'd like to change that, I said. Ezra raised his brow slightly. All of it. Yes, I want everything placed into a trust for my niece, Claire Linton. She's shown me nothing but kindness, not out of duty, just genuine care. He gave a short nod. We can arrange that. It's your right. We worked in silence, just the soft rustle of paper and the click of pens. I signed where he pointed, and with every signature, a little more weight lifted off my chest. Before I left, Ezra handed me a copy of the revocation. If your daughter attempts to act on your behalf at any financial institution, they'll be obligated to reject her authority. I folded the paper neatly and placed it into my bag. Thank you, Ezra. Outside, the sky hung gray and low, but I felt lighter, like I'd stepped into a version of my life where I no longer waited to be seen. I had chosen to see myself. When I got home, I called the bank next. It took 3 transfers and a tedious identity verification process before I reached someone named Caleb in the senior accounts department. I need to cancel all recurring transfers to my daughter's household, I said. There was a pause. All of them, ma'am? I see there are several monthly payments in place. Yes, I said. All of them. I'll take care of any penalties. Another pause. May I ask the reason for cancellation? I could have said something vague. A change in finances. A family restructuring. But I didn't. Instead, I told the truth. Because I've decided that my support no longer has to come at the cost of my dignity. There was a brief silence. Understood. We'll process the cancellations today. Thank you. After the call ended, I sat still in the quiet. Only it didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt clean, like a room aired out after a long winter, like a space I had finally reclaimed. The next morning, I went to the bank in person, not because I doubted Caleb, but because some things, the important ones, deserved to be done face to face. I wore my navy wool coat, the one I used to reserve for weddings and church. It was too warm for it, really, but it made me feel presentable, grounded, like someone who took herself seriously, even if no one else had for years. The branch was calm. Quiet conversations, the whir of printers. A young woman with sleek black hair greeted me at the counter with a practiced smile. I have an appointment with the branch manager, I said. Your name? Maris Delaney. She typed something into her terminal, then nodded and gestured toward the waiting area. Miss Quinn will be with you shortly. I sat near the window, both hands gripping my purse, not out of nerves, but because I was carrying history. Statements. Photocopies. Records of payments made over more than a decade. Evidence, I suppose. Though I hadn't come to prove anything. I just wanted to see it all clearly. 10 minutes later, Miss Quinn arrived. Late 40s, tailored blazer, sharp eyes. She offered a warm but professional smile. Miss Delaney? Please come in. Her office was cold. I didn't mention it. I just sat across the desk and placed the folder in my lap. I understand you'd like to make some changes to your accounts, she said. Yes, I replied. I want all outgoing transfers to my daughter's household permanently canceled. No exceptions. And I'd like to create a separate trust. She didn't flinch, just reached for a pen. Do you already have a beneficiary in mind? My niece, Claire Linton. She lives in Winlow. She visits me every year. Claire calls just to say hello. Once, she drove across 3 states just to bring me soup when I had the flu. Miss Quinn nodded, but didn't comment. I'd like the funds previously designated for my daughter's household redirected into this trust, I continued. Not just the recurring payments, all the discretionary reserves I've been holding back in case of family need. I no longer consider that a healthy category. I thought I caught the briefest flicker of a smile at the edge of her mouth. We spent the next hour reviewing every detail, percentages, access terms, investment preferences. I asked questions. I made choices. I signed. I'll need identification documents for Ms. Linton, she said, and her signature on a few activation forms. She's expecting it, I replied. I told her there might be something coming, something small. I hadn't told her the amount. It wasn't a fortune by today's standards, but it was more than I'd ever had growing up. More than I ever thought I'd be able to save. I wanted it to go to someone who would treat it with care, not entitlement. When we finished, Miss Quinn stood and extended her hand. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Yes, I said. Could you print a record of every financial transaction I've made to my daughter's household over the last decade? She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. A few minutes later, she returned with a stack of pages. Line after line, transfers, deposits, monthly allowances, one-time payments. I tucked the stack into my purse without reading them. Thank you. Outside, the sun had broken through. I walked back to my car slowly, the weight of the documents resting against my side, not heavy, just present. Just real. At home, I made tea and spread the pages across the dining table. My name appeared over and over again. Small amounts, large ones. The grocery stipend, Isla's music lessons, Logan's dental bills, gas money, car insurance, a new water heater. I circled each entry with a red pen, not to shame myself, but to remember. In total, 127 transfers over 10 years. And that didn't include birthday gifts, babysitting, groceries, or the nights I slept on their couch when someone had the flu. It didn't include the holidays I cooked for 12 while they smiled for photos and left me to wash every dish alone. 127 times I said yes. Until now. That evening, I sat down with a blank sheet of paper and wrote a letter, not one I intended to send. Just one I needed to write. Dear Harper, I hope someday you'll understand that love and obedience are not the same thing. I raised you to be strong, and I'm sorry if that strength made you believe I was unbreakable. I said yes too many times, not because I didn't have limits, but because I believed saying no would mean losing you. I see now I lost you anyway. So now I choose myself. Love, Mom, I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Then I sat in the quiet and let stillness take the place of sorrow. I hadn't planned on telling anyone, not yet. Not until the dust had truly settled. But then, late Thursday afternoon, the phone rang. Logan's name appeared on the screen. Polite to polite. Forced. Hey, Maris, he said with a cheerful flatness. Just wanted to check in. Harper mentioned you've been taking some space. We respect that, of course. She's just, worried about you. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, I'm fine, Logan. Is there something you needed? A pause. Just a beat longer than natural. Well, it's just, we noticed the grocery transfer didn't go through this week. And the car insurance, too. Figured it might be a banking error. No, I said. It wasn't an error. Another pause. Longer. Right. So, is everything okay? That's when I heard it, the change in his voice. Concern, slipping into irritation. That subtle shift. The quiet hum of entitlement rising like steam. I've decided to stop the payments, I said. All of them. There was silence. Not even a breath on the other end. Then, carefully, did something happen? I wanted to ask if he genuinely needed to ask. If it seemed normal to change the locks on the woman who'd rocked his children to sleep and called it boundaries. But I didn't. Instead, I said, Harper made it clear I'm no longer part of your family. I'm simply honoring that. I think maybe you're taking things a little personally, he said. That one did make me laugh, soft and hollow. Goodbye, Logan. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message from Harper. Mom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're creating a lot of stress in our household. This is not how families behave. I stared at the screen, then turned the phone over, face down on the table. That evening, I returned to Ezra Connolly's office to finalize everything. He greeted me with his usual calm, as if we were discussing crossword puzzles and not the redistribution of a lifetime's worth of effort. "Everything is prepared as discussed," he said, handing me the thick folder. "Your niece, Claire Linton, will inherit the house, the accounts, and the remainder of your estate. Your daughter and her family have been removed as beneficiaries." I read the first page carefully. Each clause settled into place with quiet precision. "And the trust?" I asked. "Fully active as of this morning. Claire's already received the notification," Ezra said, "and she'll have full access once we complete the final signature." He slid the pen across the desk. I didn't hesitate. When I was done, he gathered the paperwork, aligning the pages into a clean, final stack. "Are you sure you don't want to leave a token amount to your daughter?" he asked gently. "Some people prefer a symbolic gesture." "No," I said. "I've already given her enough." We sat in silence for a moment. Then, quieter, he added, "It's never easy, Maris. Even when it's necessary." I met his gaze. "She changed the locks," I said. "That was the easy part for her." "I'm just following the rules," she said. He gave a solemn nod. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves, sweeping them along the sidewalk in swirling patches of gold and brown. I walked to my car slowly, not from pain or stiffness, but because I felt tall, grounded, like I was standing inside my own skin again. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I almost never did. I wasn't celebrating, not exactly, but I wanted to mark the moment. Not with fanfare, but with quiet recognition. I had done something hard. I had told the world I would no longer be used, not even by the people I loved most. And strangely, in that calm, still evening, I felt no regret. Later, as I rinsed the glass and turned out the lights, I passed the small table in the hallway, the one with the framed photo of Isla on her first day of school. I paused, then gently lifted the picture out of the frame and tucked it into the drawer. Not to discard it, not to forget, but because I no longer needed it to remind me who I was. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Not the mailman. Not a neighbor I recognized. It was Lorraine Baxter. She stood on my porch with a paper bag and a half smile that didn't quite cover the concern in her eyes. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she said. "Still warm. Figured you might not be baking much lately." I hadn't seen Lorraine in nearly 2 years, not since her husband's memorial. We used to talk every week back when our daughters were in school, and we still believed we had all the time in the world. I stepped aside. "Come in." She moved through the kitchen like no time had passed, setting the bag down with her usual quiet efficiency. Same sensible shoes. Same brisk way of pouring coffee without asking. I didn't stop her. "You've been quiet," she said after a few sips. "I've been occupied." She nodded, stirring her drink with the handle of her spoon. "Harper called me," she said. "Told me you were having one of your moods. That you were withdrawing from the family." I didn't flinch. "Is that what she told you?" She did. But I told her I'd come check for myself. I laughed under my breath. "Well, I'm not having a breakdown, if that's what you're wondering." "I didn't think so," Lorraine said, setting down her cup. "I told her you're the clearest-eyed woman I've ever met, and that if you were doing something drastic, it probably meant something drastic had happened." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The etched lines near her eyes, the steel in her posture. She hadn't come to gossip. She was here because she knew. She knew what it meant to be pushed too far. I said no, I told her, to watching the baby. Just for one weekend, because I had a doctor's appointment. Harper said I wasn't being supportive of the family. Then she changed the locks. Lorraine let out a slow breath. "Mercy." She texted me, I added. Didn't even call. Just told me not to come around anymore. Her expression didn't change. Her voice didn't soften. And Logan asked why I canceled the car insurance transfer, as if that was the betrayal. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm. Study. You've been carrying them for years, Maris. They only noticed when you let go. I didn't answer. Good, she added. It's about time someone reminded these grown children that love isn't a debit card. I smiled then, just a little. But it was real. It reached into the hollow space beneath my ribs and warmed it. We sat for a long while after that, talking, not about Harper, not about the money, not even about the pain. We talked about books, about old neighbors, about the baffling complexity of modern coffee makers. Lorraine refilled our cups twice. At one point, we laughed so hard I had to blot tears from my eyes with a napkin. When she finally stood to leave, she paused in the doorway. If she comes crawling back, and she might, make sure she brings a key. Not an apology. I nodded. I didn't know yet what I'd do if Harper returned. But I did know this. I wouldn't be waiting by the window. After Lorraine left, I wandered back into the living room and settled into my favorite armchair. The house didn't feel fuller or emptier than before. It just felt like mine. Then the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was Isla. Grandma, it's me. I don't really know what's going on, but Mommy's been crying and Daddy's been yelling, and I miss you. I miss your house and the stories, and I don't know. Can I come over sometime? Even if Mommy says no. Her voice cracked at the end. She didn't sound 5 anymore. She sounded older than she should have had to be. I stared at the phone for a long time after the message ended. And then, without thinking, I hit save. I didn't call back. Not yet. But I wrote her name, Isla, on a small yellow notepad I kept on the counter. Not as a promise. As a beginning. The letter arrived the next day. A real letter envelope, stamp, her handwriting scrawled across the front. I recognized it immediately. Harper had always made her capital H's look like backward 7s, a habit her 3rd-grade teacher could never break her of. I held the envelope for a full 5 minutes before I opened it. Inside, 2 pages written in blue ink. No greeting. No dear Mom. Just a first sentence like a slap. I hope you realize what you're doing to this family. I kept reading. She wrote that Logan was furious. That Isla was confused. That the timing of all this couldn't be worse, given how hard they were trying to keep things stable. That my behavior had become unpredictable. That she was hurt, but also concerned. She asked if I was depressed. If maybe I needed someone to talk to. She suggested therapy lightly, the way people do when they're trying not to sound insulting. She didn't mention the lock. She didn't mention the message that ended it all. And she certainly didn't apologize. The final paragraph was the seal. We're still willing to include you in our lives, but only if you're willing to be a team player. Families require sacrifice, Mom. You taught me that. I folded the letter twice, neatly, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I walked it over to the fireplace and set it on the grate. I didn't light it. I didn't need to. I just didn't want it on my table anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No pills. No tossing and turning like a coin caught in midair. Just rest. In the morning, I made oatmeal and didn't check my phone. At noon, I walked to the mailbox and found 2 catalogs and a postcard from Claire. A view of the Oregon coast, blue cliffs, sky so clear it hurt. Her handwriting was uneven and cheerful. Aunt Maris, thank you for everything. I don't even know what to say except I hope you'll visit soon. We'll make scones and sit on the porch and pretend the world makes sense. Love. See you soon. I pinned it to the fridge. Later that day, I cleaned out the front closet. It had become a sort of time capsule over the years. Isla's polka dot rain boots, Max's forgotten rattle, a plastic bin filled with broken crayons and mismatched socks. I tossed most of it into a trash bag, not out of anger, but out of clarity. At the very bottom, I found a small square envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing from Isla, a purple stick figure house, a green lawn, a lopsided sun, and 2 figures in the center. One tall, one small, hand in hand. Me and Grandma's home, it read in blocky letters. I smoothed the page gently, pressing out the creases, then slid it into a folder labeled Keep. I didn't need Harper's permission to remember who I was. That evening, as the late light turned golden across the kitchen floor, I brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat by the window. The phone buzzed again. I didn't move. It was my time now. No obligations. No explanations. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had stopped begging to be loved the right way. I hadn't been back to the library in more than a year. Not since I turned in my badge after 42 years of service, plus 3 more as a volunteer. I'd told them it was time. My joints ached. The computers moved faster than I did. And the new director had a smile like she was constantly tolerating me. But on Monday, something stirred. Not guilt. Not loneliness. Curiosity. I packed a canvas bag, nothing inside but a notebook and a pen, and walked the 6 blocks from my house. Past the bakery. Past the empty lot where the old theater used to stand. Until I reached the familiar stone building with its wide glass doors. It still smelled the same paper, dust, and that faint lemon floor polish they used on the weekends. My shoes made the same soft tapping on the tile. I moved slowly, not from pain, but out of reverence. This place had been my second home for nearly half a century. Behind the desk sat a young woman I didn't recognize. Red hair, thick glasses, earbuds looped around her neck. She looked up and gave me a polite smile. "Hi there, can I help you find something?" "No, thank you," I said. "Just browsing." I wandered the stacks. Fiction. Large print. Local history. Same layout. A few new titles. Some old favorites were still there, books I had shelved 1,000 times, covers I could recognize like neighbors I hadn't seen in years. In the children's corner, a boy no older than 6 sat cross-legged, reading aloud to himself. His mother hovered nearby, half distracted by her phone. He had a missing front tooth and the kind of voice that didn't apologize for being loud. I watched him for a moment. I remembered Isla at that age, how she'd curl against my side and whisper the endings to stories before we even turned the final page. And I let the memory sit. Not to hurt, but to warm. I smiled. Near the back of the library, in the reference section, I saw a familiar sight, the old donations cart. People used to leave boxes of books there, mostly worn paperbacks with cracked spines or coffee rings on the covers. I used to sort them myself, deciding what could be rescued and what was better left to recycling. As I leaned down to scan the spines, a voice behind me said, "You're Maris Delaney, aren't you?" I turned slowly. It was the red-haired girl from the front desk, holding a clipboard. "Yes," I said, "though I'm not on staff anymore." "I know," she replied, "but I've heard about you. You ran a summer reading program for what, 20 years? 23, I corrected with a small smile. We used to hand out popsicles to the top readers back when the air conditioning was always broken." She grinned. "I'm Elena. Just started a couple months ago. Honestly, it's kind of overwhelming." "Well," I said gently, "the Dewey Decimal System hasn't changed." "That helps." She laughed, then hesitated. "Would you maybe, I don't know, come in sometime? Help us sort donations? The backlog's a mess, and I could really use a second set of hands." It caught me off guard to be needed again. For something real. Something not tied to family or guilt or obligation. "I'd like that," I said. She looked relieved. "Great. No pressure. Just, if you feel like it." I walked home slowly that afternoon, the breeze soft against my neck. I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel small. I felt useful. On my own terms. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote at the top of the first page, things I still love old books. Quiet mornings. Cinnamon tea. Claire's postcards. My own company. I paused, then added, saying no without apology. The call from Logan came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the garden, trimming the rosemary bush that had exploded after weeks of spring rain. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my apron. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But I answered. His voice was tight, formal. "Maris, we need to talk." I didn't respond immediately. I pinched off a dried sprig and dropped it into the compost bucket. We've been trying to be patient, he continued, but this is getting out of hand. I leaned against the fence, letting the sun warm my shoulder. What exactly is out of hand? I asked. The money, he snapped. The sudden cancellations. The trust thing. Harper's beside herself. She changed the locks on me, Logan. She was upset I said no to babysitting. For one weekend. Because I had a medical appointment. Silence. She felt abandoned. She felt inconvenienced, I said, cutting him off. And instead of talking to me like an adult, she sent a message and changed the locks. She's under a lot of pressure. We're all under pressure, I replied. But not all of us retaliate by cutting off our mothers. He exhaled sharply. Then his tone shifted. Look, let's be reasonable. You've made your point. We get it. But this is hurting Isla. She misses you. She asks about you every night. The words struck harder than I expected. Not because they were manipulative. Because they were true. But I stayed quiet. Don't you want to fix this? He asked. For her. I took a breath. I want a relationship with my granddaughter, I said. But I'm not going to buy it with silence and direct deposits. Not anymore. So what is this? He asked, voice rising. A punishment? No, I said. It's a boundary. You both made a decision. And now I'm finally making one of my own. His voice hardened. You're tearing this family apart. I didn't flinch. I've been holding this family together for years. You just didn't notice until I stopped. And with that, I ended the call. I didn't cry. I went back to the rosemary. Later that evening, I poured a glass of water and sat on the back steps as the sun dipped behind the neighbor's roof. The air smelled of basil and warm earth. The phone buzzed again. A message from Harper. Mom, I don't understand what you're doing. This isn't like you. It's cruel. You're leaving us in chaos. The mortgage is due. The cards are maxed. You always said family takes care of family. Why stop now? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened my notebook and wrote, because I finally learned that family isn't just who you take care of. It's who takes care of you. The paperwork was finalized that Friday morning. Ezra met me at the front desk, folder already prepared. He didn't ask if I'd changed my mind. He didn't offer one more moment to reconsider. He simply said, everything's in order. We sat in his office, reviewing the documents line by line. My initials here. My full name there. Final signature at the bottom. By the time I handed the pen back, my hand ached, but my shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. You're officially done, Ezra said, sliding the pages back into the folder. No further action required. I appreciate you, I said quietly. His smile was small, but sincere. You've done a brave thing, Maris. It didn't feel brave. It just felt overdue. Outside, the wind had picked up. Pale summer clouds gathered at the edges of the sky, and the streets smelled of warmed pavement and early leaves. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the station and bought a ticket. One-way ticket. Midweek departure. Destination, the Northport coast. Claire had offered more than once. Come stay. Come breathe. The guest room's yours anytime, she'd said. The ocean's loud enough to drown out everything you don't want to hear. I'd always said later. After the holidays. After Isla's birthday. After someone else's need had passed. Now there were no more excuses. At home, I began to pack. Not hurried. Not frantic. One drawer at a time. Only what I needed. Comfortable shoes, warm sweaters, my notebooks, a few favorite books. At the back of the closet, I found the pale blue scarf Harper had given me 5 Christmases ago, still wrapped in its original tissue. I held it between my hands for a moment, then folded it gently and placed it in the donation bag. It was soft. It was beautiful, but it wasn't warm. When the bag was full, I called the women's shelter and arranged a pickup. I didn't need keepsakes anymore. I needed room. That evening, I stood in my bedroom and looked around. The house didn't feel smaller or lonelier, just paused, like a song left unfinished on purpose. I wrote a note for my neighbor, set a mail hold, and set my alarm. I slept well. In the morning, I brewed coffee, watched the light stretch across the floorboards, and stepped into a day that belonged entirely to me. At the station, I boarded early, found a window seat, and watched the city slip past like an old memory. Halfway through the ride, I pulled out my phone. One new message. From Harper. I heard about the trust. Claire? Really? I can't believe you'd leave everything to someone you barely see. After everything we've done for you. You've made your choice. I hope it keeps you warm. I read it once, then deleted it. No response. No fury. Just gone. Across the aisle, a small boy lay curled beside his mother, humming softly. She stroked his hair without speaking, and he leaned into her hand like it was the only thing that mattered. I watched them, not with longing, not with sorrow, just peace. 3 hours later, the train pulled into a quiet, misty station. Claire was already there, waiting beside her dusty silver car, waving with both hands like a child at a parade. When I stepped down onto the platform, she pulled me into a hug that didn't ask for explanations. That didn't come with conditions. You look taller, she said. I feel it. She laughed. Come on. I made scones. There's a chair on the porch with your name on it. We drove with the windows down. The sea air wrapped around us, cool, wild, and clean. Claire's house sat on a bluff, just high enough to hear the ocean, but not quite see it. The wind moved through the tall grass like it had somewhere to go. The porch curved around the house like arms meant to hold, not just decorate. Inside, everything smelled of cinnamon and fresh laundry. There were books stacked on every surface, chipped mugs in the sink, and a cat named Percy, who climbed onto my lap like he'd been waiting for me for years. I didn't unpack right away. I didn't need to. Claire had already set out towels and a sweater on the guest bed, along with a note. If you want to talk, I'll be in the garden. If you don't, I'll still be there. That first evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket across my knees and a scone in my hand. Claire joined me with a glass of wine and didn't say a word for 10 full minutes. Just breathed beside me. Eventually, she asked, "Are you all right?" And I told her the truth. All of it. I told her about the locks, the message, the shift in Harper's voice the first time I said no. I told her about the folders, the revoked power of attorney, the revised will, the trust. I told her I didn't cry much anymore, not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd finally learned the difference between grief and guilt. She listened the whole way through, not with pity, with presence. When I finished, she said, "I think you did something the women in this family were never taught to do." What's that? You chose yourself. I nodded. It only took me 74 years. She smiled, still faster than most. We stayed on the porch until the stars came out. Then we went inside and made tea. I slept with the window open that night, the hush of the ocean folding in and out like breath. The next morning, we walked down to the shoreline. My knees ached on the gravel path, but I didn't apologize for needing her arm now and then. I just leaned when I had to and kept going. At the edge of the water, I took off my shoes and let the salt water bite at my ankles. This, I said, feels honest. Claire just nodded. That's why I never left. That afternoon, we baked a peach cobbler, played gin rummy on the porch, and debated half seriously whether cats understand English. Percy declined to comment. Around sunset, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Different this time. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this." "I want to. Everything feels broken. Isla won't stop asking about you. She cries at bedtime. Logan doesn't understand why I'm not angrier. But I don't know. I think I miss you." I stared at the screen. Claire, seeing my face, asked softly from her. I nodded. "She says she misses me," I told Claire. "Do you believe her?" "I believe she misses what you gave her," she said gently. "Is that the same thing?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stepped back out onto the porch and looked up at the sky. It was streaked with lavender and burnt orange, the gulls circling slow and wide over the water. For a moment, I imagined Harper the way she used to be 8 years old, barefoot and sticky with popsicle juice, shouting, "Look, Mom," every 2 minutes as she darted across the backyard. And then I saw the last message. The changed locks. The silence. I couldn't make those two versions fit together. Maybe I wasn't meant to. That night, I listened to the ocean instead of replying. I set my phone on the windowsill and whispered, "Not yet." The wind moved through the room as if it had heard me. A week passed. Then 2. I stayed in Claire's guest room longer than planned. She never once hinted that I'd overstayed. She simply added another blanket to the bed and a few more tea bags to the drawer. We found a rhythm: slow mornings, small meals, quiet hours. Claire worked in the afternoons from her laptop in the sunroom. I read novels I'd forgotten I loved. In the evenings, we sat on the porch and let the world soften. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I stopped waiting for anything. And when I did look, there was just one message. From Isla. "Hi, Grandma. Mommy says you're on a trip. I hope you're having fun. I made a picture for you, but don't know where to send it. It's you and me and the big cookies you made last summer. Can you write back soon? I miss you so much." I read it slowly. 3 times. Then I wrote, "Hi, sweetheart. I miss you too. I'm near the ocean. It's loud and beautiful. There's a cat here who reminds me of our gingerbread stories. You can always send me your pictures. I'll keep them forever. You are in my heart every day." She replied within minutes. Yay! I didn't hear from Harper. Not a word. But something strange began to settle in me. Not anger, not ache. Just understanding. She had made her choices. I had made mine. Maybe someday our paths would meet again. Maybe not. But I no longer felt small in the waiting. Claire came home one afternoon with a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "A key," she said. "To this house. Just in case you ever want to come back. Or never leave." I opened the lid. Inside, a single brass key tied to a length of ribbon. I didn't cry, but I held it like something sacred. That evening, I packed a small bag. Not to leave. Just to prepare. I wanted to go home for a little while. To walk through my garden. To open my windows. To sit in my chair and feel the quiet I had earned. Claire drove me to the station. She didn't ask when I'd return. At home, the house was just as I'd left it, clean, still, waiting. But not needy. I watered the rosemary. I sat on the porch. I brewed my tea. A day later, there was a knock at the door. Not Harper. It was Isla, standing on the front step, holding a folded drawing in her hands. Her backpack hung crooked on one shoulder. She looked up at me with the same wide eyes I once saw blinking through a crib rail. "Mommy dropped me off," she said. "She said I could stay the weekend. If it's okay." I opened the door without a word. "Come in." She kicked off her shoes, ran to the fridge, and laughed when she saw the postcard still pinned there. "You kept it," she said. Of course I did. That night, she curled up beside me on the couch, her favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm, an old blanket wrapped around her legs. We didn't talk about the locks, or the silence, or the weekend that broke the pattern. We just read her favorite story, the one with the fox and the moonlight, and the line she always whispered with me at the end, "Home is where someone waits for you." I kissed her head, and in that moment, I knew I'd done the right thing. I hadn't left her behind. I just finally stopped leaving myself behind. And if there's something in this story that sits with you, let it remind you that it's never too late. Never too late to draw the line, to reclaim your peace, to begin again on your terms, quietly, clearly, without apology. Sweetheart, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a little note in the comments. I love hearing from you.